Hello everyone, and welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Andy, and I'm making these videos on Dante's Divine Comedy, explaining them and everything. So last time, we talked about the violent, but there's many different categories of violent, and today we're going to talk about the second type. So, first, it might be a good idea to acquaint you with the geography of how this circle works. If you look at this image here, on the outside, you see the centaurs that we encountered in the Circle of the Violent previously, and right next to that, in the next inner ring, is the river Phlegethon that Dante had to cross with all the murderers in it, and you see them swimming in there. And next, you see a bunch of trees, a bunch of gnarled branches, and that is where we are today. So, Dante was riding on the back of the centaur Nessus to cross the Phlegethon, and when he gets to the other side, he was in a forest. But he notes that it's a pretty nasty forest, because all the trees are thorny trees, and the leaves of the trees are not green like you typically see them, but they're black. So it's completely colorless and lifeless atmosphere. Perching in the branches and living in the area are harpies. Now, a harpy, for those of you who are not acquainted with mythology, harpies are strange raven-like birds that have a woman's head. They like to cry out forlorn things and make grim predictions. So it's a very sad atmosphere. These harpies, it's all death and grim, and in their harpy voices. And so this is the kind of atmosphere that Dante's walking into. And he's walking around, but he doesn't see any people there. He's kind of scratching his head. Virgil says, "Pay attention, for you are in the next ring of the Circle of the Violent. And if I told you what it was, then you probably wouldn't believe me." So Dante looks around, can't see anyone, but he listens closely and he hears moans and cries of agony. But he can't see anyone. He looks around the trees thinking that, well, maybe the suffering people are hiding behind the trees. But he still can't see anyone. So then Virgil says, "Okay, try this. See that tree over there? Why don't you break a twig off of that tree?" So Dante goes over and he snaps the twig, and it bleeds with black blood coming out of it. And Dante hears a moan and cries saying, "Why did you hurt me? I used to be a man before I got turned into a tree here." And so Dante is really stunned and shocked. All the trees are actually people that have committed suicide. Pretty grim forest to walk in. And Virgil says to the tree, "Well, maybe we can make amends. Maybe Dante can go back and tell people about you in the world of living." And he's like, "Oh, if you're gonna have that as a reward, I can't refuse your offer." And so then he decides to tell them about himself and how he ended up in this ghastly place. So his name, although he doesn't mention it in the story, is Pierre de la Vigne. And he was a chancellor to the Emperor Frederick II in France. He was a really good chancellor, and he was faithful to his master. He did a good job for him. But sadly, the other people that were working in the high class as servants of the king, they were jealous of Pierre. And so what they did is falsely accused him of treason. And unfortunately, King Frederick believed the story. And so he had Pierre blinded and then thrown into prison. And in his moment of despair, Pierre decided to end his life. Pretty sad story. And he thought that killing himself would end the pain, but unfortunately it didn't. And then Virgil whispers to Dante, "Okay, why don't you ask him some more about the nature of this?" But Dante tells Virgil that he doesn't want to say anything because he's just feeling so sorry for this guy that he just doesn't know what to say. So he asks Virgil, "Oh, can you please talk to him for me?" And then Virgil's like, "Okay." So Virgil asks him, "So how does it work when you fall in here?" And then he says, "Well, what happens is that when you go to the Minos and he sorts you, Minos wraps the tail around them, it flings you over into this seventh circle right here, and you fall in a random spot, and then You shoot up from the ground as a sprout, and when you're growing, when you're like a small plant, the harpies come and nibble on your leaves and hurt you, and you slowly grow up to be this gnarled mess of a tree. And at the end of time, when everyone gets their bodies back, as we talked about earlier, in hell, it means that their pain would intensify. So in this particular circle of the suicides, since they rejected their own body by killing themselves, they will not get to be back inside their body ever again, which is why they're taking the form of a tree, because they rejected their body. What will happen is that their bodies will be hung from the trees. So picture a hangman's noose with their body hanging from every tree, but the person is actually the tree. What a ghastly, forlorn image that brings. And so the conversation is interrupted when Dante and Virgil hear in the thicket, they hear like a rustling around, and it's two men being chased by a black dog. And one of the guys trips over a thorn bush and breaks it, and the dog tears him to pieces. But then the other guy who was running, he stops to laugh at his friend's plight that he's too slow. But since he stopped like that, then the dog got him too. And then Dante hears a moan, but it's not coming from either of the two men. It's the thorn bush that's speaking. And he's like, oh, why, this horrible thing broke me, stupid guys. And he tells Dante that he's from the city of Florence, from Dante's own hometown. And he talks of an ill omen that because city of Florence was named after St. John the Baptist to take the place of the Roman god of Mars, the god of war, because of that, Mars wants to get his revenge on the city of Florence by causing the city to have constant civil war. And I don't know, that's kind of like a random, really just a bad omen. I don't know what the point of even having that is, but Dante picks up some of the broken pieces of the bush and places it near it out of reverence for his hometown. So that is the very grim and sad circle of the suicides. Suicide is classified as violence against oneself. So I have to make a caveat here that this video is in no way intended to be irreverent to those who have lost someone through suicide, or to themselves are struggling with the thought of suicide, especially in the times of the 2020 COVID, when people are on lockdown and becoming depressed and are having thoughts of suicide. It's just a really sad thing. In the church, in her mercy, has proclaimed that people that aren't in their right mind while committing suicide still have a possibility of being saved, because they either don't know that it's wrong to commit suicide, or they're not in their right mind, so they can't think correctly. So it's possible that people can be saved, and Dante even allows for that because he has Cato of Utica as the guardian of purgatory, which, if you're going to purgatory, it means that eventually you're going to go to heaven. So he thought that because Cato didn't know that suicide was an evil, that he would be spared. But one thing you have to consider is that it's no guarantee of safety. So one good way to prevent suicide is just the simple thought of be afraid of hell, because it is possible to go to hell for suicide. Because if you think about it, God created all of our bodies, and we are made in his image and likeness, and therefore our lives are not our own. And we don't have any right to call ourselves worthless, or to call our bodies worthless, or to call our lives worthless, because we all have worth in God, even if we don't think we have worth. One example that I love using is the movie It's a Wonderful Life. Here I'll show you a short clip from it.
Are you sure this is Bailey Park?
No, I'm not sure of anything anymore. All I know is this should be Bailey Park. But where are the houses?
We weren't here to build them. Your brother, Harry Bailey, broke through the ice and was drowned at the age of 9.
That's a lie. Harry Bailey went to war. He got the Congressional Medal of Honor. He saved the lives of every man on that transport.
Every man on that transport died. Harry wasn't there to save them because you weren't there to save Harry. You see, George, you really had a wonderful life. Don't you see what a mistake it would be to throw it away?
So, in the video that you watched, you saw that George Bailey is thinking of throwing away his life. And so he gets an opportunity to see what it would be like if he was never born. And in this particular scene, he's seeing the graveside of his brother. And his brother was a war hero that saved several men on his platoon. But the thing is that when his brother was a boy, George saved his life when he was 9 years old. And so, if George was never born, then his brother Harry would have died. And because he was dead, he couldn't have saved those men. And so, George's life has value. If he never existed, then those men on that platoon would have died. And so, I invite you to think about your own life and how it's connected to others and what would happen. Think about what would happen if you did not exist. How would it affect other people's lives in a negative way? Even if you're alone in the world and you think that no one would miss you if you killed yourself, God can still use you in the future. God has plans for you. Otherwise, he wouldn't have created you. So I just encourage you to stay strong, and whatever you do, stay out of hell, stay alive, do not kill yourself.